Hey, it is your buddy, Peace and Harmony with you here today. Much love going out to all the beautiful, empowered harmonizers. We are zooming in and focusing in a little bit more in depth on a super important question, viewer question, that is to really understand what it means for the covert narcissist or someone who they feel might even be psychopathic. What does it mean to lack empathy? When we talk about an individual who is a covert narcissist, one of the typifying qualities of this is a pathological sense of self-importance, which means off the grid, unhealthy disease, just as if you were to, have a clinical test, your pathology report, maybe it came back with cancer. That would be meaning pathology, not healthy. Something you need to remove, get rid of, fix, take a pill for, have a surgical removal, a problematic issue. But we're talking about, the intangible here. We're talking about, emotions. We're talking about energy in motion. We're talking about personality traits and behavior, thought process, and then how to understand, incorporate, and what it personally means for you. Y-O-U. You are the most important factor here. And, the covert narcissist also, one of the typifying or crucial factors, sort of pivotal and important, really pivotal for you to understand is lack of empathy. Lack of empathy means an inability to understand, recognize, listen to, absorb, process, and then communicate with an understanding of the feelings, opinions, wishes, stance, position of others. So what they're standing in, their truth. So you literally stand in your truth, and it goes with you. It walks with you. It brushes your teeth with you. It eats with you. Your self-care is inextricably intertwined. Your DNA is then affected, as you evolve with this type of communication, this type of mindset, these types of people. And if you're really surrounded by an especially strong, meaning, really energetically forceful, malignant, covert narcissist or psychopath, and you are surrounded with people with a lack of empathy, meaning they gloss over you. They don't really pick up on what you're saying. They do not give you that respect. They're not processing. They are lacking, really, there's been a lot of studies that have been done, psychological studies, that talk about this, And it's, to really understand what this means is to understand that they don't have and process the mirror neurons. They don't. So you're born with, your anatomy, your neural anatomy, and one of them is empathy. So that's just part of being a human being. And you have mirror neurons that then develop, which means you're able to then pick up, resonate, process, and then, have thoughts that then are able to be shared and communicated through the mirror neurons, so the empathy neurons. So they're able to mirror back to you what you're feeling. They're able to listen and process. You're on the same page. They get who you are. You're allowed then to be who you are. You're allowed then to live in a sense of authenticity and support and validation. So this is the crux. This is the crossroads. This is the really pivotal aspect of understanding the wounds, and then, not only the wounds that you have experienced as a result, but also what this person, how this is different and how this creates a problem for others. An inability to be authentic, an inability to be yourself, an inability to think on a truth basis. So it affects one's thought pattern. One begins to diminish oneself. In other words, you are then diminished, treated as, not really, in other words, the energy that you are sending out is shut down. You are an energetic being. your energy and motion are your emotions. This is the fuel, the driver. This is what propels you in your life. I mean, we're talking really at the heart base, the gut base. And oftentimes, if you have been exposed, living with, working with, in your community, your surroundings, married to, your sibling, significant other, I don't know, your partner, people have so many different labels nowadays for who they are with. Your partner, your significant other, the master of your soul, your soulmate, all these different terms, and then, God forbid they should have a gender, God forbid that they should, so it's really important that you kind of understand the journey, the cause that creates the effect. So and then with this lack of empathy is a feeling that you aren't, is sort of communicated then, is that you are unimportant. What then is non-verbally communicated, and it's to understand that the weight of communication is on body language and nonverbal communication. So again, tons of studies. A viewer said, well, it's so good that you're not too clinical here. Okay, great. So we're not going to get too clinical, but I do want to bring in some understanding so you understand the scientific and the creative base, understanding that this is more than a science. This is more than art and science. This is sort of a personal process and epiphany. It creates a personal relationship with life. L-I-F-E. The life. Okay, we're talking about the quantum field. We're talking about universal energy, universal source energy, whatever it is, we're talking about energy. Energy cannot be created or destroyed. But it's to understand then how the energetic body within yourself, which you have running with you, so it's about time you understand how it works. How do you process these relationships? How do you process the experience? What is your takeaway? Particularly, what is how you are assimilating this and have processed this, and then deriving then a conclusion about your I am and your identity and who you are, how far you go in life, whether you're limited by this. It's so very important. So the problem with lack of empathy is meaning that they're not, the mirror neurons are not on. You're not standing in front of a healthy mirror. You're standing then in front of a wall. A blank wall that's basically resisting, telling you to go away. You are not wanted. That, you are not loved. You are not important. And especially if this is your significant other, then you're sort of looking to them for validation, support, communication, a high five, a hug, a kiss, a letter, a text, an outing, something that is involved in the world of relationships. So a lack of empathy is sort of oftentimes, then manifested in entitlement attitude. In entitlement, meaning, then how is this then processed? Meaning that they think that they can just sort of bully themselves away and hurt people and not have to be responsible for what they've said, for what they've done, to how they've impacted you. And oftentimes it is negative. These are the people who want to give you the negative review, the negative, if they even do a review, because they don't, but the lack of empathy really manifests in so many ways, particularly that of minimizing or sort of circumventing your existence. It becomes an existential question. So we're really talking about something very important, which is your I am. And if you're around a narcissist who does not have the healthy mirror neurons, it's more like you're standing in front of a wall. You're going to feel stonewalled, ignored, non-existent, especially if this is, in pivotal, formative years of your life, i.e. ages 0 through 7. And so if it depends really in where in your life you are up against this. Is this in your formative teenage years? Is this in your formative 20s, your 30s, your 40s, your 50s, your 60s? And to what degree have you sort of been living in with the unconscious? So a covert narcissist is kind of like they're a living unconscious awareness. They are not aware. They are not cognizant. They do not listen then. So this entitlement, really manifests in a number of different shoots in your experience. And one of them is not being recognized, related to, listened to. Someone nodding their head and going, okay, yeah, I agree. So you'll feel that there's a chronic and ongoing disagreement. This can then be processed and then is received by the individual as, I am not loved. I am not worthy. I am not fit for existence. I am bad. I am wrong. I am ineffectual. And then there's usually something negative that then creates a block. And then this creates a whole, can of worms under pressure, under emotional pressure, energetic sort of, opening or evolutionary. This is how the evolution works, is that your body then receives it as rejection. I am rejected. And then this then creates just sort of this chronic fear. How can one survive? I.e., you are a social being. I mean, this is just who you are. It's, you are. You are a person. You have feelings. You have truth. You have validity. This is not your first rodeo. You are here. You are present. You deserve to be acknowledged, validated, heard, understood. This is what human and humanity is. So people oftentimes develop then this void or this abyss that does not end, that cannot be satisfied, because the pathology of the covert narcissist, the one who sort of is very aloof, non-communicated, indifferent, it comes off as if they don't care, they don't have the time of day, they don't ask how you're doing. And oftentimes it can be very important, especially now during the pandemic. People's emotions are on fire. They're really lit. They are sparked. It's a really, radical change of direction that things are going amidst all this. And so if you are this then becomes exasperated or really triggered if you are around, somebody who does not validate where you're at. They're just sort of, even though they're quote unquote there, they might not really sort of give you the time of day. They're not really present. You'll sort of, but the problem is that the brain, the individual, the mind and feeling and emotional body of the other, the spiritual presence, the I am, that's like clamoring for acknowledgement, attention, validation. So if they don't get that, then it'll either be perverted, distorted in a number of different ways, which then can be and then coded within as an automatic process. We're talking because you have a very powerful part of your brain and existence, and your spirituality is the unconscious. This is what is picking up. This is the great recorder of your life from 0 through 7. It's doing nothing but absorbing. It's just a sponge. It's absorbing and recording. It does, so if you were taught or planted seeds of doubt, distrust, lack of empathy, your unworthiness, you were, left alone for too long, you were, emotionally abused, a lot of negative seeds planted. And then here you've got this garden of life and you're like, I have nothing but chokehold here. And you feel unrecognized, unvalidated, like no healthy seed is growing in your garden. People then get to this desperation point. It can become a midlife crisis, a crisis of identity, a crisis of reality, not knowing what your reality is, not feeling, the body processes it as if, as a threat. So even though there's no outward threat of being, validated, in other words, no one has given you something that it's very stealthy, it is covert, it's beyond detection, so, until then you be able to then, you're able then to detect it with the naked eye, is what I'm saying, once you go along the healing journey. And so it's very important to understand the reveal, the manifest of the lack of empathy and what it really is and what it means and why you have felt and experienced how you feel. And the unimportant. So your body does not consciously say, oh, wow, that person just ignored me, I feel unimportant, until it's been going on and on and on again. And then the body then processes it and then can pervert it through defense mechanisms or coping strategies. Meaning, I don't matter, so I'm just going to let myself go. I don't matter, and so I'm just going to live with this shame. I don't matter, I don't exist, so I'm not going to go to school. I'm not going to learn anything. I'm never going to be supported. I will never dance again. Isn't there a song like that? I mean, you got no rhythm. I mean, it's the emotions. That's what we're talking about. And so if you have been ignored, very important is to understand that the covert narcissist relationship is really, it's like being with a mirror, an ineffectual mirror, which becomes more of a wall that repeats, graffiti slogans to you. You are horrible. You are damned, or whatever. All these sort of situations where the mind is then processing this. Your I am, your spirituality really becomes driven to the wrong direction. I call that NOD thinking. Negative orderly direction thinking, behaving, and becoming. Versus the other path of becoming. I mean, look at the life journey of Michelle Obama. I mean, just look where she came from the south side of Chicago all the way up to the First Lady. That's what we call a awesome life trajectory. That's where we talk about someone who has surrounded themselves with people who have empathy, who listen, who acknowledge and validate, who, have an empathy. So, in other words, she got there not through people who were cold, callous, unlistening. Do you see what I'm saying? So it's very important that not only that you understand this deficit or lack in your life, and then its ability then to create lack and poverty, not only physical poverty, emotional poverty, spiritual bankruptcy, chronic shame, pathological shame, mental illness, problem with attachment disorders, which means connecting with others, and so, oftentimes then, because in my feeling, because it's so underutilized, because you are not validated, it becomes just sort of, use it or lose it. So it becomes very weak, like a weak muscle that is, a person who has been, confined to their bed, and then they go through muscle waste, young and old, and this becomes even more significant and apparent to the naked eye as you get older, as you mature, as you study. I mean, you can't, you can ignore, you can carry the baton, and ignore yourself then. Do you see how a lack of empathy has radical implications for your personal and life development? Your human development, whether you go on and become self-actualized, whether you live to the fullness of your being, whether you then surround yourself with others who are different energetically than the ones who have hurt you, or a lot of people feel that there's a scar, it'll never get better again. Well, I have good news. It does. You have to tune in and tap into the understanding of the cause that's created this effect and understand its symptomology in your life, and then change it. Then, there's so much to talk about. But that the mistake that the narcissist makes is that you'll keep coming back to support them. Even though they have lack of empathy, even though they have minimized you, even though you have been laden in fear or steeped in fear and intimidation, what feels like you're giving up your power, it's not fair or right to you, people create all this assimilation and meaning and interpretation. I mean, it's an autonomic process, just like breathing. So this is all from your subconscious mind. The subconscious mind is super, super important and powerful, and you need to harness that, because that is where the healing and the change is going to take place. It's not just getting a new pair of shoes, a new, it's an inside job. We're talking about the internal, accessories. We're talking about internal, working on the internal. We're talking about your I am. We're talking about your feelings. We're talking about your identity. We're talking about what this all means for the long term, the long haul, your life trajectory, where you go. I think it's very interesting, in just kind of circling back to another connection, because how important this is. Imagine when a rocket, like let's say SpaceX with Elon Musk, if you put a rocket and then you send it on its course, that is called its trajectory. But how you channel it in, how you program it, how you condition it and tell it where to go with your good old computer. The mind, the body relationships are very similar. There's a very close parallel. I would say, this bracelet is hurting me. So it is important to understand that your trajectory. If you're with if you have a lack of empathy, your trajectory just goes. It's like it creates an engineered chaos. This really becomes a pathology when it gets very severe. You're dealing with a psychopath or a psychopathic mindset, meaning they have. Not only do they have no empathy, but they have a lack of conscience. They don't care if they don't listen. They don't care if they don't get you. They don't care about your feelings. They don't care about your safety. They don't care about your well-being. They do not get, they unless there is something that you can get for, do for them, work for them, pay for their kids, pay for their living, paying for their, being their support, being their ego stroker, taking care of their kids' college, whatever it is you got roped into, you have to realize that oftentimes that was roped into under a pressure, under a force, which didn't factor your feelings into the equation. And that is not acceptable. That cannot be tolerated. Your standards and your boundaries, I always circle back to that. Your boundaries, boom. Just non-existent. Your standards, boom, they are irrelevant. They are not living, you are not living up to your true authentic self. You need to extract then and detach and understand that your I am has a healthy existence before you even came across this individual, before you even came across this sort of abuse, this sort of neglect, this sort of lack of empathy, this entitlement, which oftentimes gives them an ability to just, plow over you, and just not, and so people feel very two-dimensional after that. They feel that they're very unimportant. They don't get attention the way that they need to. They don't surround themselves with professional, joyful, non-manipulative people. In other words, they are surrounding themselves with an exact replica of the abusers. It creates a pattern, an ongoing boom, 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 until you break the pattern. You break the cycle. And this has to come with the work that we do here on the channel. And it's important to say and understand that because of the lack of empathy, these individuals then propel themselves in life through an entitlement attitude, an entitlement mindset. And oftentimes people just will cooperate and they will get their way. They will have it. And then so not only does that cause a repeated injury to others, if you don't support it, then you get the narcissistic injury or the narcissistic hurt, where they then amp up their they're minimizing and they're ignoring and then just further elevating themselves. They think that they will elevate themselves away from the problem, that they will just hide in hide in the rafters or go into their tower of narcissism, where they're sort of just helping themselves and consuming oftentimes rather than giving. It's just kind of like an all consumptive that's just how they are. They will take without guilt. They will hurt without guilt. They'll make fun of others without sensitivity. They don't have an empathy. And then this is when you see the hover back, because they think, oh, I can just come back again and again because it has been allowed, you have cooperated, and people feel that I can never fit into another circle of people, I will never improve. That is flawed thinking. That is erroneous thinking. You have thoughts that are very habitual. Just like when you get your coffee in the morning and you keep reaching for it, that's an automatic process. Or, you're going for your wine, it's just, you don't think about it, and then you know that, because if all of a sudden the glass of wine is not there, you're at your couch or your dinner table and you're like, boom, and you're reaching for it, that's how you can experience habituality in your own physiology. Just like when you learn something, a dance, you learn something, you have trained and programmed, your mind and your feelings to follow that. So oftentimes it's important to understand that you have then been trained to stay around and relate to your own self with a lack of empathy, which then becomes the good old-fashioned self-sabotage, misery, chronic unhappiness, rebelliousness, not only a mediocre life, but then a life without joy and authenticity. It will disrupt your passion, your life purpose. It'll take you off course, off track. You feel that you're not where you're supposed to be, and this becomes a chronic fear. You feel like, and that is because the original self, the original spirit, the original I am before the abuse is like trying to clamor for acknowledgement. I am here. It's like, hello, news flash, it's trying to get your attention. And oftentimes people then will ignore their own best thoughts because they have not been supported to acknowledge and validate them, and they have not been supported. Do you understand the deficit in the relationship and how that creates a deficit and a negative mindset, an attitude for your identity? This is extremely important to understand and realize the habituated thoughts that are just on automatic process. They're on automatic loop. It's important that you become sensitive, conscious, and aware of these in order to correct them. It's important also to understand that this impact is like an imprinting. So it's as wired as if you were to see, in nature. So you have to understand how this works in nature. Have you ever seen a series of baby ducks following the mother? Their instinct, in other words, the mother's like, we're going to go over here. The food is over here, and then they guide them, and then they all will walk and follow right in suit in a perfect little line, just like you see the toddlers, So there is an understanding, a deal, a contract, if you will, between that mother goose or duck and then her little ones, those ducklings, and then sometimes if you see the ducklings, where the mother is flown somewhere, they're all just sort of, following each other, and, they might then break apart, and then one or two might get lost. So if you have 7, two might sort of get lost and then think that they're going to go somewhere, and then they're missing the train. They're then abandoned. So this becomes a problem, because people then feel that if they don't continue to stay with this very familiar suffering, that they are then going to abandon themselves. They are going to be chronically abandoned and then never see anyone, have a relationship, do anything, which, people then begin to really retreat into chronic post-traumatic stress syndrome or complex PTSD. They become fearful, afraid, they can't pick their head up, they're afraid to go out into society. It manifests in a number of different ways if you've been surrounded by people who lack empathy. It will shut you down, shut down your thought process, shut down your emotions. And the good news is that your I am, you have to get in touch with and be at peace with, and not in a pressured way, your I am that exists prior to the abuse. Oh, but peace and harmony. this has been, my whole life. Well, okay then. Okay, wonderful. I mean, if that's the case, then don't worry about it. That is your reality. That is your truth. Now it's time to understand that that is like a little book or an encyclopedia of books that have been put on the side. That's how and then coming back to the fullness of life. Not as it's been sliced and diced for you by a manipulative others, but the fullness of your being. I am. And that is a pure state that you want to attain, work towards, relate to, acknowledge, become conscious of, and it might take a deliberate living in that space, but you need to hold that space. More on this in the next video. This is your buddy, Peace and Harmony with you here today, and I hope that these videos do help. Please share, please subscribe, and for goodness sake, please donate for more great tools, videos, discussion, and support. Peace be with you, and have a beautiful day.